What if the biggest complaint about Wuthering Waves' newest update is actually right? Because a few weeks ago I put out a video praising 3.5, pretty much wall to wall, positive, and most people agreed with me. But under that video, one comment listed 7 specific problems with the story, not vague complaints, specific ones, backed up, clearly written by someone who played through everything I did. And when I actually sat with them, a few of them I couldn't argue with at all. So that's what this video is. I'm taking a deeper look at 3.5, not by recapping it, but by going through this comment point by point, exactly as it was written, and giving you my honest reaction to each one. Some of these I'm defending, some of these I'm not. If you haven't seen my original video, that's fine, this works completely on its own. Let's start with the first one. Enraged Rover's attack gets blocked by a bomb that's not even using his real body. Yeah, that one stings a little. I actually can't argue with this one at all. And weirdly, this isn't even the first time I've had this exact complaint. Back in Septimont, Kartatia's ultimate, supposed to be one of her strongest attacks in the entire game, got stopped just as easily. It didn't even feel like a fight, it felt like a formality. And here we are again, except this time it's worse. Because who's attacking? This is Rover, the arbiter, and this isn't Rover calm and calculated, this is Rover enraged, one of maybe a handful of times in the entire game we've seen them lose control, because Yangyang is missing and something in them finally snapped. That's supposed to be the moment strength actually matters, and it gets stopped by a random guy who isn't even using his real body. Not a big fan of that. Moving on. Suisui and Hsin make a bet, then Suisui does 2 Fortnite emotes while you do an Osu minigame and then Hsin says, I yield. What? Maybe I need to be Chinese to understand some reference in there, I don't know. This one I actually disagree with, pretty firmly. I think the problem here isn't that the scene is confusing. I think the problem is trying to read between the lines that were never actually written that deep in the first place. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Hsin isn't testing Suisui's compatibility, she's testing something much simpler, what choices Suisui would make. Because at the end of the day, Hsin isn't deciding who's strong enough to hold that power, she's deciding who's worthy of choosing who inherits it. And the choice she's watching for is Rover. That's it. It's not a hidden cultural reference, it's not something you need extra context for. It's a loyalty test dressed up as a game, and I think it plays exactly as straightforward as it looks. Yangyang and Rover's relationship feels forced because we've never seen him write back to Yangyang, ending up in a disconnect with what Rover experienced versus the audience. Okay, this one's harder. I actually have to half agree here. If this were a novel, a movie, any medium where you control every character's presence at all times, yeah, this would be a real writing problem. You can build 2 years of emotional tension off screen and expect it to land the same as if we'd actually watched it happen. But this is a gacha game, and continuity between characters is genuinely one of the hardest things for this genre to pull off. When your roster is this big and new characters show up every single month, the ones who aren't currently relevant to the main story quietly drop out of view. That's not an excuse, that's just the reality of the format, unless a character is actively following the protagonist through every single bit. So, is the Yangyang Rover relationship underbuilt? A little, yeah. But within what a gacha game can realistically do, I don't think it gets handled much better than this. The opening of the episode does real work setting the tone and explaining what this relationship even is, precisely because the game knows we haven't seen it play out in real time. Not the biggest fan of the approach, but given the format's limitations, I think this is close to the ceiling. Lahai-Roi's goodbye felt extremely rushed, in addition to the 30 FPS pre-rendered cutscene that butchered the lip-sync. Okay, this one's actually 2 separate arguments hiding in one sentence. I actually don't agree that it was rushed, at all. Let's remember something, Lahai-Roi already got his epilogue. That happened at the end of Lahai-Roi's own arc, and honestly it was the best epilogue any region's gotten in this game, period. I didn't expect anything more than that. So when 3.5 opened with this extra scene, that wasn't Kuro rushing a goodbye, that was a bonus nobody asked for. I'm not treating it as the send-off, because we already got the real send-off. This was just a nice surprise stacked on top. Now, the pre-rendered cutscene itself, the visual quality, yeah, I'll give them that one. That wasn't the best looking moment in the game, and the lip sync noticeably suffered for it. But rushed? No, this was a goodbye to the characters, not the region, and as a bonus nobody expected, I think it worked. Muyu has legit concerns about the Sentinels and their origins, as well as simple emotion being able to override their whole purpose, making our playable characters look like complete dumbasses to never even consider that as a possibility. Hell, we didn't even address the whole Umbrax's thing this whole time, and instead argue some but they love us point. Alright, this is where I really disagree, and I want to actually walk through why, because I think this is the point that matters most in this whole comment. My read on Muyu, at least based on what this episode alone gives us, is that he's a shallow antagonist. And I don't mean that as an insult, I mean it as an honest description of what the story shows us. Because no matter what reasoning he dresses it up in, at the core, Muyu is just someone who resents the Sentinels because they have power he doesn't. That's it. Every concern he raises is really just his inferiority complex wearing a philosophy costume. Now, his actual argument that the Sentinels could theoretically be corrupted, manipulated, turned against humanity, is that a real concern? Sure, in a vacuum, but here's the thing, that logic applies to literally anyone with power in this world, any nation's leader, any resonator, anyone can be corrupted by the Trinodian, by the Grand Architect, by simple human weakness. If this person could theoretically be corrupted one day is enough to justify distrust, that's not skepticism, that's an excuse to distrust everyone. Which means it isn't really an argument at all. And more importantly, the story hasn't given us a single reason to actually believe it. Every Sentinel we've met has done nothing but protect this world. Some of them sacrificed themselves for it. Muyu's suspicion isn't backed by anything the narrative has shown us, it's projection. I know some of you in the comments actually pushed back on this exact reading. A few of you said Muyu felt like a genuine scientific skeptic, someone raising a legitimately unaddressed question about artificial beings holding this much power. I get why that reading is appealing, I just don't think the story earns it. Not yet anyway. Rover getting new element, in my opinion, was the weakest of all the previous ones. We had to fight and suck Dreamless for Havoc. Kartatia's frequency gave him Aero in a very emotional moment, and Electro is delivered to him by a carrier pigeon? Bruh. Strong disagree here too. Actually, I think this might be the opposite. I think this could be Rover's strongest awakening yet. Here's the thing about the previous ones. The catalysts themselves were genuinely strong moments, fighting Dreamless, Kartatia's frequency, those are good story beats on their own, but that's all they ever were. No build-up beforehand, no follow-up after, they happened and then the story just moved on, like it never occurred to anyone to revisit them. This one's different. If you go back to the Suisui and Hsin's bet, the one from point 2, that wasn't just a side scene, that was the build-up for this exact awakening. There's a whole segment of this episode quietly setting this moment up before it happens, and unlike the others, this power actually comes with a cost. Hsin is explicit about it. This was never meant for Rover to wield. Accepting it isn't just gaining strength, it's accepting whatever price comes attached to it. Now, I want to be honest about something. Right now, this is only a setup. It's the strongest foundation Rover's had for an awakening so far, but whether it's actually the strongest awakening depends entirely on whether the writers follow through on that cost later. If they drop it the way they dropped the build-up for every other one, this falls right back down the same complaint. But for now, I think this one's earned more than any of the ones before it. Yangyang's whole SP so far makes no sense. If we're gonna hand out SPs with no consequences, according to Huaxu Academy, just because someone sang a song in Chinese it's gonna be a disaster, I would much rather not have Yangyang in this story at all, and replace her with Liangyu. That would awaken with a song to her ancestors and the land she protects, ascending to a 5 pullable character. Instead, we got something that feels like a forced push that stole Liangyu's spotlight just to justify a nepo baby being on the game's app icon. Okay, this is the big one, and I have to disagree here too, but I want to actually take this argument apart. because I don't think it holds up the way it sounds like it does. Could Liangyu's story have worked as this awakening instead? I'll actually give Rude Boy that much, it probably would have worked, but that's not the same as proving Yangyang's version doesn't work. This other path could have been good too, isn't evidence that the path they picked was bad. Those are two separate claims, and the comment treats them like the same one. And here's why I think using Yangyang specifically was actually the stronger move. This is a gacha game with a roster problem. Every new character risks pushing an old one further out of relevance. Every time a studio can bring an existing character back into the spotlight instead of introducing someone brand new, that's the harder, better choice. This is the first time Kuro's really committed to that, and I think it's the strongest version of that idea they've attempted. But even setting that aside, calling this forced or a nepo baby push ignores how much build-up actually led here. She's not a poster character for this entire game by accident, and if you look at the epilogue, that conversation with the mysterious presence at the very end of the episode, it's about as clear as this story ever gets that Yangyang isn't just relevant for this patch, she's being set up as central to everything going forward. So no, I don't think this was Kuro handing her power for free. I think this was the story finally paying off 2 years of quietly building towards exactly this. So, 7 points. Some I agreed with completely, some I pushed back on hard. A couple I landed somewhere in between. Because the truth is, my first video on 3.5 was pure enthusiasm. There's nothing wrong with that, sometimes a story genuinely earns it. But going through this comment forced me to actually test that enthusiasm against something real, instead of just repeating it. Some of the criticism held up, some of it didn't. And I think that's a more honest place to land than 10 out of 10, no notes. So now I want to hear from you. Which of these 7 do you agree with? Which one don't you? And which one do you think I got wrong? Anyway, that's gonna be all from me for this one. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more story discussions like this one. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.